Hello everybody, and welcome to my Tier 2 Mana and Artifice showcase of these spells. So, just a quick recap. So in Mana and Artifice, you can create these different types of spells, and each spell has a different effect. So I'm going to be covering what those spells do. But to start, when you enter Tier 2, you actually unlock a new thing called Affinity Tinkering, which is something I'm going to do a quick overview of right now. If you check your Oculus, you can see this Affinity Faction Power. As you can see, this Aldrin Wellspring Energy, it has filled up a little bit. And that is because I put a Mote of Ender, or you could put any Mote, but in this case it is a Mote of Ender, into this here. And then you put some fuel at the bottom, and then you click the button there. And then it starts to fill up this area here with some of that energy. And you can then use that energy in areas near where you have a lesser Eldrin Conduit. The recipe for these things is like so, with different motes for different conduits. So here I have a simple touch break spell. You can create this in Tier 1, and I'm going to put it into this Affinity Tinker table. And now I'm going to select the affinity I want to change it into. You can change it to any of the affinities, as well as these two buttons. I'm not entirely sure what they are. I assume that they do mean something though, but you can put it here, and then you click the button. As you can see, it just kind of will pull all the way down. And if we look in here, you can see that the Eldrin Wellspring Energy has been drained, and now we have our Touch Break spell. And if you look based on the particles in my hand, this is now a Ender spell. But in case you guys want to see it a little bit more closely, I'm going to cast the spell a few times, and as you can see, I now have the Ender affinity. The main use for this is so then you can have all of your spells be of a single affinity, and that's just super useful because it makes it so that the discount for having all spells of one affinity applies, as well as a few other things, such as when making things becoming rote. And thinking of things becoming rote, here is the Book of Rote. So this is the recipe for it. You have a bunch of vellum, some mundane rings, some string, and some Arcanist ink combined in a mana weaving altar with these symbols. And then you get this thing called the Book of Rote. So this Book of Rote, when you hold Control and right click by default, you can see it opens up this massive spell list here. And this is just one example here. So you can set your different spells and just alternate through things that have become rote. Well, how does something become rote? Well, if you look under Sorcery, under each spell, you can see that it has this little progress bar, and this progress bar will show how close the spell is to becoming rote. And when a spell is rote, you can then combine it indiscriminately just with other spells in the Book of Rote. You can even have multiple effects go on the same spell, although as you can see, this increases the complexity as well as the mana cost. And unfortunately, you cannot apply the Book of Rote to the Affinity Tinker table. The affinity is that of the base spell. So the next thing I'm going to be covering are the Tier 2 cantrips. So if I were to open up the little menu here, we have two: Dispel and Drought. So the Drought cantrip, when I finish drawing it out, well, I'm going to use a little cheat thing here. So when this is drawn out, as you can see, when I throw three of these, it will draw the thing. It drains all the water next to you. Just to demonstrate again, we have the thing here. I'm going to draw out the shape, and boom, it gets cleared out. It acts with the same amount of power as a single sponge, but you don't need to dry it out. And the Dispel effect, it dispels a negative effect, so I'm going to draw it out. And as you can see, I'm no longer poisoned. I'm going to show that again. So I have the poison effect, and now I'm going to draw the shape, and bam, the poison's gone. These are pretty niche use cantrips, but they have their uses. So now onto the good stuff, the different spells. So if I were to open up the Book of Rote, we have a few different effects here. So the new Tier 2 spell components are the Bound Axe, Sword, Bow, Shield, and Projectile things. So what these bound tools do, I'm just going to have it be a sample thing here. What it does is that when you activate it, you get a weapon. Or in the case of a shield. And what this item does is it functions exactly like the non-magical variation. So it just is like this is an axe. But if I were to switch it out to be, say, a sword, it's now a sword. Or if it's a bow, it's a bow. Now the difference between these things and normal things is that if you were to apply something, such as fire damage, to this bow, well, now this bow is a normal bow that does 5 extra fire damage. So if I were to pull it back, you can actually see that fire effect with the little arrow. So what these spells do is that when you have something such as the bound axe, a bow, or sword, it will apply whatever effect it is, in this case fire, on the target that you hit it with. And similarly, the shield will create a shield that you can block with, and if somebody attacks you, they will be affected by the shield. Projectile is different in that instead of making it so that when you use a weapon on somebody, it doesn't affect, instead is just a projectile. And you guys may notice that unlike the self component, none of these things will happen to, other people. So I am actually going to, all of these happen to other people, not none of them. So I am going to have to occasionally switch it back to the self component, but for most of these, I'm going to have it set as projectile. The activate component is a little bit weird. You can't use it with a projectile. As you can see, I just blast it here, but it has to be touch. And this actually does give an excuse for something we're going to cover later, which is increasing the range of your touch spell. But as you can see, what the activate component does is that it allows me to activate something at a distance. I'm pretty sure this can be any form of redstone, but I'm just having the lever here as a replacement. Bind wounds. It's a very interesting thing. It gives you this bind wound status effect up here. And this is just a minor regeneration effect. And it lasts until you move. As you can see, I've walked a little bit, and that's now gone. But it also will go away if somebody attacks you. This is definitely something you want to use when you're in a safe place, and, you're wanting to heal. Divination. Beautiful spell component. What it does is that it gives you like this little sight here. Oh, I got rid of my ores. Okay, here we go. So you have the divination effect, and now, wow, there are ores on the other side of this wall. Yeah, so divination just gives you, like, vision on all ores. They will have this little outline here, and then when you break them, it does it, and it applies to all ores within range instead of just one. So that's a pretty big benefit to having this effect. Now, as you can see, it does have a pretty small range, but if you're just doing strip mining, and you just see a little hole in the side, that means that there's an ore there, making divination a very solid spell effect. Entangle is strange. I'm going to apply it to myself to show what it does. As you can see, I can't walk. That's what it does. It stuns whichever target is affected by it, so then they cannot walk. It's extremely short lasting only 1 second, but this can be increased at a later point. Another component is frost damage, which I have my little demonstrator here, and as you can see, he took damage, and he's also got the slowness effect. That's pretty much it. Instead of having the damage over time effect of fire, it just freezes them for a few seconds, but making them a little slower. The next component is Gravity Well, which is best shown by doing it yourself. So, I can jump normally, but then I activate Gravity Well and I can't jump at all. Just as like gravity is so strong. If I go all the way up here, boom, Gravity Well. It's a very strange spell component, but I guess if you want to not be able to jump, Gravity Well is your helper. Leap is the exact opposite. It's maybe kind of self-explanatory, but Leap makes it so that you can jump by giving you the jump boost effect. Poison. It's also self-explanatory. It gives you the poison status effect. Slow fall. Also kind of self-explanatory. It gives you the slow fall effect. So slow fall effect now. Which actually, it does look kind of weird when you combine it with Gravity Well. You've got Gravity Well and Slow Fall. This is, you fall slower, but you also are falling significantly faster. By the way, our next spell here is called Transitory Tile, so I'm going to apply it. Actually, this one's also another touch one. And the Transitory Tiles, what they do is that when you touch a block, it gives you a little bridge. So if I were to get up close here, I can create a little bridge here. Just to show that it won't work with projectiles, I'm going to shoot it here. And as you can see, nothing is created. Transmute is another thing that has to be applied externally. And as you can see, I've got this transmute. And I'm going to apply it to here. As you can see, it just turns things as, it transforms things rather, as if they've been affected by the transmute cantrip. So I'm pulling out a copper block for demonstration purposes. And now I'm going to apply it with the transmute spell. And as you can see, it got converted into transmuted silver. So now we actually are getting onto another part of this, as signified by the blocks of diamond, which is called modifiers. So I did mention earlier that we could potentially increase the duration of things such as, I believe I said gravity well. Oh, sorry, entangle. Entangle is the thing I was referring to that we could make it last longer. So this is actually a modifier. The base spell does not have this effect. If we were to go to an inscription table and put it down and set down a self entangle, as you can see, we don't have access to these little arrows. But we actually don't have access to the duration component yet, but let's say we have access to the delay component. We can actually now mess with these arrows. But as you can see, it does increase the cost by adding in a few extra ingredients that weren't there before. So the different components that we have are damage, which is kind of self-explanatory. If we have something such as fire damage, we can increase the damage, as well as increasing the cost and complexity. And you actually can apply these effects after you create the spell. So as you can see, if I were to crank it up, it increases the cost for copying the spell over. I'd not recommend doing so. I would recommend you keep it at the cheapest form, and then just crank it up after you've created the spell. This is unless you need to create a spell with a high complexity, an example being as a tier requirement, you will have to create a spell, I believe, of 35 complexity or more. Just do that one time, and then just leave it at the base amount for the rest. So the damage component just increases the amount of damage. The delay component increases the amount of delay. So if I were to take my Book of Rote, have a delay effect, so I'm going to have it affect the other person. So I'm going to have a delay. After an entire second, this man will take 5 fire damage. So I'm going to shoot him, and 1 second later, he takes the fire damage. The next one of these is the range component. That does not apply to this, but it does apply to the touch component. We can increase the range of it. This would be for the activate component, where it's notable, as well as the transitory step, which both require the touch component to function. The next one is the speed, which is an application for the projectile component. As you can see, we can crank up the speed of this, as well as, interestingly enough, the fling component. We can increase the speed at which you are flung, although it caps at 3. Just to show what this looks like, so I'm going to have a self-fling spell. I have a self-fling spell at the speed of 1. As you can see, I'm just flying around, trying to not mess too much with this, with creative flight. But as you can see, it gives me right around this amount of distance. This amount of distance being shown a little bit more scientifically. I'm standing here, I jump, I shoot, I get up to here. Right around to the end of the diamond board. But now I increase the speed to 2. I'm going to start right around the same spot, jump, and I get past the end of the diamond blocks. Now I crank it to 3, I jump and shoot. And I get all the way up to here. Increasing the speed for this is ridiculous. As you can see, I just zoom. Absolute zoomage. The speed component is so good. But that's also because I really like the fling spell. I'm extremely biased in favor of it. It just is, oh my gosh, it's just such a good spell. And that is possible through this speed component. But, there also are many other increasing the damage of spells. More important later on, but definitely a big deal here. I personally do not see many uses for the delay component, but it exists. There's probably some sort of niche use that you guys could probably figure out. But the delay component exists. And the range component is good for touch, like I said. Just crank that up. But for these other ones, as you can see, maybe for the weapons, it increases the swing range. But, yeah. I guess, if I want to be able to crank up the range, to have my axe attack him. You see my axe, I can now whack him from out here. No, here. Aha. As you can see, I can whack him significantly further. No. But I also could just walk up to him peacefully. I don't know what I'm doing at this point. If you guys enjoyed this little showcase of all the Mana and Artifice spells, feel free to stay tuned for when I create another one of these in the future. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope that you guys have a very good day.